Hey everybody, it's Monday. Time for your Monday message with me, Dr. Jenn, and the Rose Center for Learning. I am about to go to the beach, if you're wondering, and so I thought I would try to sneak in a little message before I go and do that. I hope you're getting outside today too. I think it's going to be a good one. So, this week's Monday message is to go where you're guided. What does that mean? That means that sometimes, we talk a lot about structure and how important structure is and how important routines are. And I've talked about that before. And that's definitely true. Having an established routine and some structure to your day makes it way more likely that you're going to achieve what you set out to achieve in a day and feel accomplished, which increases your mental health, and be productive and efficient in your productivity, which affects your mental health and other things like your occupational health. But the idea is of to this week's message is that sometimes life will throw something at you that will require you to abandon your routine and just sort of go where you're guided for a little time and wherever it may take you. And I think a lot of us really struggle with that because we become such slaves to the routine that anything that comes in and kind of messes up with our routine feels like something we should avoid. But sometimes the best chunk of growth comes from doing it a little differently, going where you're guided, leaning in, leaping in, full on. What is this lesson all about, and how is it going to teach me? So, what are some examples? I'll use an example from my own life recently, which is I have a pretty established routine of exercise that involves some social aspects of people that I work out with. And then I have my social life of people that I hang out with. And then I have everything else that's in my life, which is quite busy. And so I don't have a lot of time for those first two things in a good day. But what's happened to me recently is just this inherent need to dive deeper into racism and my history and the experiences of my friends, and to really sort of find out how I can grow and engage more. And in figuring out how to engage more, I have to listen and read and think and talk to people. And that is a whole process that takes time and care and consideration. And this is just something that I have felt is what I need to be focusing on. So, because I don't have a lot of time, that ends up meaning that it's taking the place of some of the things that I would normally be spending my time with. And that can be hard. It can be hard to feel like I am dropping the ball in other areas. But sometimes you really just have to focus on something specific for a time, not forever, but for a time, so that you can really devote yourself to it, whatever it is. So for me, devoting myself to this study and this mindful conversations and this journey that I'm on of self discovery, that for the moment takes precedent over anything else. And that's okay, because if I don't devote the time, I'm not going to grow. And this is an area I've identified as something that is important to me. So, what are the areas in your life that that have come up that you have neglected or pushed away or ignored because you didn't want to break your routine and break the good thing that you've got going? Sometimes it's worth creating some courage and going where you're guided. Even if where you're guided ultimately is a place you don't want to stay, it's really about growing, and growing happens in lots of different ways, not only with our successes, but also with our hardships and our challenges and the things that just flat fail. Um, that's not a term. The things that fall flat is what I was trying to say. So it's not always a bad thing. In fact, it's often a great thing to go where you're guided, even if ultimately it teaches you something you don't want to do. Still a good lesson in there. I think an example that comes up a lot for people is the person that they end up deciding to be in a relationship with, or partner up with, or get married, or whatever that means to you. Um, Often the most successful relationships have a similar story of, like, I was completely not interested in anyone like this particular individual, and I don't know why, but I just decided to give it a chance. And, my heart was saying this was interesting, or my friend was saying you should totally look at this person, or whatever it was that was the guiding force. And a lot of times people try to ignore it, and they ignore it for a certain amount of time, and then it just doesn't work, and they realize they're not happy, and so they go towards it. They go where they're guided, and then it ends up being the best relationship. That's a fun example when that happens. um, yeah. So things like whatever the opportunities are, things that you were pretty certain you didn't want or would not organically go towards on your own, and remaining open to being guided there can be a really great thing. What's another example? Well, you might have something the opposite of what I'm talking about. You might have social skills as something that you really need to devote some time on. So perhaps you're moving to a new place, or you've just recognized that your social life is not where you want it to be. And maybe you're going to say, I'm going to spend some time devoting myself to this, which might mean a little bit less with my extended family, or a little bit less time on trying to develop my job and career the way I want it to. Or, I'm going to do all of those things, but I'm just going to, my time that normally I would spend doing jigsaw puzzles, or whatever you do with your free time, I'm really going to devote myself to throwing myself into all these different social activities and seeing where I can make friends and what I like to do and what interests me. And that's just going to be my main focus. And sometimes when you're doing that, things will come up that you'll think, oh, I've never done that before. I don't think I want to do that. But go where you're guided. Sometimes the best things that end up being your beloved things to do are activities that you never thought you would enjoy, that you thought would fall flat, and they don't. You go and you throw yourself in, and you go where you're guided, and all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, this is something I actually love to do now, and I can't imagine my life without it. It starts with trying. And so often you'll have some idea that is different from what you thought you would enjoy. And that's the idea of going where you're guided. Jump in, see where it takes you. Obviously, another example of that would be same exact situation, but with a job. So, that idea of what do you want to be when you grow up, that age old question everyone likes to ask, and we like to ponder on our own, that might come up with some conscious ideas of things that you think you might like to do or that you would be good at. But often, when you talk to people who have developed careers and are older, and done this a couple times, often the things that end up being really good hooks are things you wouldn't imagine you would have been good at. Did I say that right? Things that you wouldn't necessarily have known you would be good at, or things that you were not immediately attracted to or interested in. Sometimes it's somebody else in your life that's saying, hey, you know what? I think you should try this. You might actually really like this line of work. And so you give it a try. Sometimes you fall into something totally by chance, but your heart starts to get a little excited about it. And that's the idea, is even if you have a plan. I just worked with a client recently who had a pre med plan. This was her plan. She was going to be a doctor, and she had spent years sort of guiding herself in that direction. And she happened to take a couple of classes that were required electives in an art world, and she just realized that she actually really loves art. And so she's had to do a whole paradigm shift for her future of imagining herself now in focusing more on art than on medicine. And that was a very hard pivot. And now that she's quite happy. But it was a hard pivot, and she had to really go where her heart was guiding her, and where her talent was guiding her, and where maybe the universe was guiding her. So that's another example of going where you're guided. So the trick of going where you're guided is to keep open to these messages that are going to come to you through your own heart flutters, through the words of somebody else, through total happenstance. But just to, we all want to have direction, and we want to have goals, and we want to move towards things, but you also always want to remain open, to messages and ideas and influences and passion igniters coming from all sorts of other places. And when you can be open to it, you're more likely to be able to go where you're guided. And I have found that really the best things come from doing that. The best things in your life come from going where you're guided. So Listen with not only your ears, but with your whole body. Listen to where you're being guided, and then lean in, go there, go where you're guided. You might be surprised. You never quite know where you're going to be guided. For example, right now, I'm hitting the beach. That's your Monday message of mental health, people. Hope you have a really good week, and I'll catch you next time.